Right, it's that time of the week once again to be taking a look at yet another episode of Doctor Who Series 12. In today's episode review, I'm going to be taking a look at the fourth episode of the series, which is of course Nicola Tesla's Night of Terror, as written by Nina Metvia. Now this episode was one that I was incredibly excited for, because for those of you that have been watching this channel for a number of years, you will know that I adore historical episodes of Doctor Who, especially episodes that have a science fiction mix, where we see historical meeting aliens from out of space, and this episode pretty much defines that exact concept. So naturally I went into this story being incredibly excited as to what was going to happen. I didn't really read too much beforehand. I pretty much watched this episode going in completely blind, over the knowing it had Nicola Tesla in, and I came out of the other side being incredibly happy with what the story was as a result. Of course I will be covering that throughout this review. However, of course, as per usual, why not leave your mini reviews in the comments section below, respectful of everybody and what they think of Doctor Who generally, and let's get 2020 off to a good start and stop being critical and horrible to everybody, because social media seems to be full of that at the minute. Let's create some positivity for once, as opposed to just wanting to rip each other's heads off constantly. So if you haven't seen my previous Series 12 episode reviews, I definitely recommend checking those out. Of course I have done a double review of Spyfall Part 1 and Part 2, and of course last week I did take a look at the rather unusual episode, which was of course Orphan 55. So this episode is kind of taking it back to basics when it comes to Doctor Who, and I think that is kind of why I enjoyed it. I think it would be fair to say overall on social media the reaction has been fairly positive, because it has been that blend between traditional Doctor Who, and it seems to be so far that people have more enjoyed this episode as opposed to having controversial opinions, as opposed to the previous episode last week being Orphan 55, which did of course strike quite a lot of debate. People kind of liked it, but people also hated it at the same time. This one seems to be a little bit more of an episode with a common ground, which is nice. Actually, of course, as I have covered within the previous episode reviews as a part of this series, at the very end of the review, I will of course be adding to the Doctor Who Series 12 ranking. If you haven't been introduced to this concept already, then boy, you're in for a treat. As you can see, we have really put in a lot of money into this year's ranking. I decided to rank each individual episode this year in accordance with how much I like it, number 1 being the really, really good one, and number 10 being the not so really good one. So far at number 1 we've got Spyfall Part 2, at number 2 we have Spyfall Part 1, and at number 3 we have Orphan 55. So naturally, as Series 12 progresses, this kind of countdown thing will get a little bit more fun and different, because so far we just have the 3 episodes of the season in some form of order. I have in fact added a little dreg in there, as well as Nicola Tesla with his little moustache. Yay! That's fun, isn't it? So yeah, join me at the end of the review to see where this week's episode will be on the countdown. Will it be up here? Will it be down here? Who knows? So starting off this review with a massive compliment for Goran Visnic, who did of course play the one and only Nikola Tesla himself. He is absolutely phenomenal. He is arguably one of the best actors new series Doctor Who has had in many, many years. His character was absolutely brilliant. Of course, Nikola Tesla did exist in actual reality. He was a lesser known historical figure, and it is great to see that this episode has developed on that character. We get to know a lot about him, a lot about his life and his personality throughout the duration of this story, and I think that Goran has embraced the character in a way that is so in-depth. I think that there was a lot to his character within this story, many different levels. He felt like a real person, and more importantly, he felt like a character that the audience could engage with. Certainly throughout the story itself, I didn't really see where it was going. Almost a mad inventor at the very beginning, and then towards the very end we had a rather sad and sympathetic story, and at the end of the day, this episode was a learning journey. We had us learning about a historical figure that to some may be lesser known, and we get to know a bit about his life throughout the duration of this story whilst having a cool science fiction adventure. So it's educational and science fiction. What is not to like? So after last week's episode, where we did of course go into the far future, this episode goes back down to basics into the history of planet Earth. We land of course in the early 1900s in of course New York, where we get to see Nikola Tesla trying to fight for some funds in order to progress his sort of experiments. We do of course have Niagara Falls at the very start of this story, as well as a few references to a number of his other different experiments involving electricity, of course a signal from Mars as well, and throughout the duration of this story story, we do also get a few further glimpses to some of his other experiments, of course, which naturally relate to the plot of this story itself. I love the way that this story began, where we didn't see the 13th Doctor TARDIS team being directly involved within the plot. We got to see the episode from Nicola Tesla's perspective, and then the Doctor comes barging in. It felt in fact very much like a 10th Doctor episode, where we have the Doctor coming into the situation and causing a little bit of trouble. It kind of gives a reminder that the Doctor Who universe does of course continue without the Doctor being present, and I kind of feel like that introduction of Tesla himself before the Doctor being around lets the audience kind of make their own assumptions of Tesla without the Doctor needing to come in and basically introduce him directly. By the time the Doctor and the rest of the TARDIS team are involved, you already have a good idea about who this character is and why he is so important to the history of planet Earth. Talking about Jodie as well, because normally we go through characters first before the actual plot, Jodie was phenomenal. I was really happy with her performance overall. I actually would go as far to say this is her best performance so far within the 13th Doctor era, and I'm so happy that we are finally getting to see this side of the 13th Doctor that Series 11 kind of lacked in. I think that so far it has been a very slow burner, both for the companions as well as the Doctor herself, and it's nice to see that this series has really started to grip the character and actually give her some development. Of course we have this possible darker thread leading throughout the series of her being quite mysterious and the TARDIS team not really knowing too much about her. We don't get too much of that throughout this story, if any at all. It's kind of more focused around Jodie delivering some perfect performances. Some of the key moments for me were the introduction of Tesla at the beginning on the train. I love the way that Jodie performed that. Her coming into the alien spaceship within the midpoint of the story and having that interaction with the alien of the piece. I absolutely adored that scene. It felt very much once again like a new series Doctor, and it felt like Jodie had finally clicked. She was finally in the role and she was finally given some writing that was actually decent and had levels of emotion to it that actually enhanced the narrative, as opposed to her just reeling out exposition constantly. The very end of this story as well was absolutely perfect. I loved the way that she delivered that performance, and I think that that may have been solely down to the presence of Nicola Tesla. I think that both of these characters really nicely enhanced each other's presence throughout the story, and they bounced off each other incredibly well. Of course, having that scene within the early half where Nicola and the Doctor have that rather relatable moment about being an inventor, feeling left out, it was perfect, and once again, that was probably one of the highlights of the 13th Doctor era so far. So Nina, thumbs up, please return for another story, because you clearly know how to write this Doctor, and I think that some of the writers so far have lacked in that knowledge. However, Nina has it in bucket loads. Talking about the TARDIS team, we don't really have too much to say, I think. Yaz was alright. I think that she was edging around the standard new series template of a companion. She had a few nice moments, particularly that moment with Nicola in the beginning, where they were talking about some of his inventions, naturally just to give a few more bits of background context for the audience. I thought that was okay. I thought she was enjoyable, she was likeable. They have Ryan, which he didn't do much in this story. He had a few nice moments with Skerritt. I thought that was quite nice, Dorothy Skerritt, which was also a rather nice performance from the actress, who I can't remember the name of, sadly. However, I thought that he had a few nice moments with her, however, not much. He didn't have much to do, which was a shame, especially after the previous story developing him a bit. Then we have Graham, which it was overshadowed, which is not often it happens. I liked his little sort of negative kind of vibe that he was giving to Edison. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't dislikable or anything like that, he just didn't have much to do, because this story focused pretty much entirely on Nikola Tesla, which I respect. It was a nice change, and once again this was another opportunity to maybe have one of the companions going off and doing something else, and not necessarily being a part of the story at all, because the story wouldn't have changed if some of the companions weren't in there, which is, once again, maybe relates back to Series 11, but, Had this story not featured Nicola Tesla and the Doctor being absolutely brilliant, I would probably care more about the lack in companion development. However, because of how strong this story is from the other characters, I don't care as much. Talking about Angie as well, who does of course play the Skitra, I do believe it is, looking at my notes, which I didn't pick up the first time round. I had no idea what the monster was called. She was alright. Once again, she gave me the vibe of a 9th and 10th Doctor era monster that is just there for one story, is just there to contribute a good evil monster role, and that is it. I like the fact that they're scavengers, and she provided an excellent performance, maybe hinting a little bit of a relation to the Rachnos. I think there was a lot of traits that she was using, a lot of mannerisms within her performance that was very Rachnos-ish. She certainly embraced, once again, that alien part of her character. She was very alien, and probably one of the better monsters that have came out of the Alhambra so far, because we've not really had too many. They've kind of all been templates of monsters. I'm trying to think of the decent ones that you've had. The Kablam men were pretty decent, although they weren't necessarily a monster. The Pating, as controversial as it is kind of like a bug-eyed monster, isn't it? That was kind of fun. But we've not really had too many standout monsters, or whatever they were called in the first story, Spyfall, the glowy things, they were alright. So I think that so far this series has also seen a step up in monsters, so that's good, although they didn't really have too much to do, which I think is a criticism for new series Doctor Who as a whole. It's a 50-minute story, you're going to need to have some part of the plot that has to give. It's either going to be the monsters or the characters. This episode was the monsters. However, I think the monsters still did good. I like them as a sort of creature, I like the scorpion stuff, wonderful CGI, a few odd moments within the chase scene. I thought that was a bit odd, the way that Yaz and Edison were running along, and there was the bread moment. I didn't quite know what Yaz was thinking. I think she was thinking they might eat the bread or something, but the way they were kind of hopping about and getting in each other's way, they were very clumsy monsters. But I think the figurehead of Angie, the queen of the Scorpion people, or the Skitra, whatever they are, it was fun. They were alright, nice costume, nice makeup, nice prosthetics. I have compliments all round really for them. They just could have been a bit more development in that, which you can't. Had this been a two-parter, I would have expected more development. Because it's a 50-minute story, I kind of expect what we got. I think that what is so clear about this story is that Nina has utilised the whole idea of Doctor Who and what its purpose is almost more than the majority of writers that we've seen over the past few years of Doctor Who, where you have this show that is meant to be apparently for the family audience, and you have this idea of a fun science fiction adventure, but also having an educational twist. And I didn't really know much about Nicola Tesla at the beginning, and I feel like I came out of this story knowing a fair amount about his character, knowing the struggles of his character and what he needed to face, the challenges between him and Edison, and his experiments, and his essentially brilliant, masterful ideas that were never acknowledged by anyone. And I love the fact that we go on this journey with the character, which ends off with a really lovely scene at the end with him saying the future is mine, which, not gonna lie, really touched a sort of a place in my heart. I thought it was a lovely way to end the story, even though it ends rather sadly. I think that the way that Yaz brings up that moment at the end is nice because it gives a bit of closure, although it was a little bit crowbarred in. It was obvious that they wanted to put it in there just to give closure of the narrative itself as to what happens to Nicola in the later years. It was fun, as I say. It's kind of traditional Doctor Who, science fiction and that blend of history, and I learnt something, which is what I like about this story. It has a lot of substance, which is what previous episodes of new series Doctor Who have lacked in, even into the Moffat era, especially within the 12th Doctor era. There was a lot of episodes that lacked in a substance. This story has that substance. You go into this adventure, you learn things, you have a cool monster along the way, and you have characters that you can believe in, which this story once again has in bucket loads, which is what I appreciate about it. And had the 13th Doctor, say in, I don't know, 2028, 2030, who knows, whenever Big Finish is still going and no doubt producing still 4,000 box sets a month, when they initially get the licence for the 13th Doctor, I've come to the conclusion that I don't want to see adventures with the 13th Doctor and her TARDIS team. I would love to see a box set that is the 13th Doctor and Nicola Tesla together, and then her eventually dropping him off back to sadly have the end of his life ending how it is, in a rather sad way with no penny to his name. But I think there is something so wonderful about his character that taking him into the universe would be brilliant. I think the fact that Goran is incredible as it is aids the character very, very well. But not gonna lie, I would love if at the end of this story she took him for a trip in the TARDIS and we had him for the Judoon episode in modern day England. I think that would be great, and seeing how his technology has influenced the rest of humanity, then maybe having him needing to wipe his mind by the very end, who knows. That said, even if he didn't wipe his mind, people probably wouldn't have believed him anyway after the Mars signal references throughout the early half of this episode. It would have kind of been that unquiet dead Charles Dickens moment of, yes, your name lives on forever. He knows, and then of course he dies a week or so later, or a month, I can't particularly remember. It's kind of, and funnily enough, I love The Unquiet Dead as a story, and it follows arguably a similar template to this one in a way. I was kind of expecting actually the monster to have more of a sort of similar plot to what Nicola actually creates, maybe a monster that exists within electricity. I thought that might have made sense. The monster was kind of left field, being monstrous scorpion type things. But I think that would have been the easy approach. I like the fact that Nina does something different, as in it would have pretty much been a clone of The Unquiet Dead. Also talking about the TARDIS console room, because I failed to mention it, I think, throughout the previous stories, because it's just been a reoccurring thing. It's been there. Don't get me wrong, I still think that this is my least favourite TARDIS console room of all time. However, the blue setting is really lovely. I think that to continue within the future stories. I loved the moment with Nicola in the TARDIS, knowing exactly what was going on and Edison being incredibly baffled. However, I think it suits Jodie's Doctor, which I think is important. I think that this TARDIS will always be associated with Jodie's Doctor, very much like how the sort of Series 5 TARDIS will always be associated with the 11th Doctor, being rather childish to suit his character, having the swings in there, very much like how I sort of relate the classic series-esque sort of Michael Pickwood TARDIS to the 12th Doctor, rest in peace Michael Pickwood. All of the TARDISes have something personal linked to their Doctor, and in this story I must say I grew some appreciation for this current version of TARDIS console, and I just hope that blue lighting continues in the future stories. It's been in the past ones, but I've not really mentioned it, I don't think. Oh, and one other little complaint, kind of on the same lines as the TARDIS, because it's another thing of the Doctor uses, the sonic screwdriver. I let it drop within the previous stories. I don't think I even mentioned it, but I want a visitation moment when an alien comes in and blows up that bloody sonic screw. I kind of liked the design to start with. I liked how mashed together it is. I like the fact she references the fact that it's made of spoons. However, I think we kind of need a limit. I want to see it once per story, or twice at most, because within the early half of this episode especially, she's just there scanning everything and doing that weird reading thing, which annoys me, because every time she lifts it up to read the data or whatever, there's nothing going on. There's no lights. It is quite obviously just a dead prop. It is probably the least active Sonic that I've seen with the new series Doctor Who. It was really getting on my nerves, not necessarily the amount that she was using it, but the fact there was no special effects granted, no glow given to the sonic screwdriver, nothing at all. I want to see it less. Arguably not at all within the next few stories, but the chances of that happening is very, very slim. It's funny, I've tried to in fact end this video now about 10 times, however there's a flat just below me currently booming music, because probably they're doing one of those things that normal students do, like going out and drinking, and yeah, I'm sat here reviewing Doctor Who. Anyway, I'm going to take a look at my amazing Doctor Who Series 12 ranking and put somewhere on it the episode that I've just been reviewing, because that is how this thing works. So it's quite obviously it's going to be better than Orphan 55, simply because of how many compliments I've had for this story. Ooh, fireworks, that's exciting. However, is this episode going to be as good as Spyfall? Who knows? It's clearly better than one of them, because I've just shown you the piece of paper with the name written on. I didn't think about that, did I? Without further ado, my current Doctor Who Series 12 ranking stands at week 4. As at number 1, Nicola Tesla's Night of Terror. Yay! And then Orphan 55's fell off. That says a lot about that story. Anyway, yeah, that's number 1. I thought that honestly, to me, this episode, I put on Twitter, it spiked something in my mind that reminded me of childhood when I was watching Doctor Who as a kid. It gave me the vibes of a story that I adored from the 9th or 10th Doctor era. As I say, I love the balance between the science fiction and history, the education and the fun and cool looking monsters, and to me it only really made sense for it to be at first place for this series so far, and I think I have a strong feeling that it might remain there, because I think this episode it has the rewatchability. I will more than likely go back and watch this episode within the next few months, which is something that cannot be said for Orphan 55 or maybe even Spyfall. Although it does have some rewatchability, it's not an episode that I would almost think, I really want to watch that again. However, Nicola Tesla's Night of Terror is an episode that I would want to watch again because it's enjoyable, it has good characters that are believable, a nice emotion behind it and a nice plot, and generally overall is a very, very strong story. So a massive thumbs up from me. I really love this episode. And I suppose tune in next week, hopefully a little bit sooner, maybe earlier on in the week as opposed to later on, as these Series 12 reviews have been so far, as I will of course be taking a look at the 5th episode of Doctor Who Series 12, which is of course Fugitive of the Judoon, I do believe it is called, as the title suggests, featuring the return of the Judoon, which, according to Doctor Who's social media, there's going to be a few twists and turns within the plot, so we will need to wait a few days to find out what those twists and turns actually are. Will we get the timeless child revealed? Most likely not. Will I eventually pick Orphan 55 up from the floor? Most likely not. So I guess stay tuned for more reviews of Doctor Who Series 12 next week. So thanks for watching this review, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.